Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It's Friday, and this week we have been reading in the book of Nahum. And in some of these shorter books, we have offered some additional reading that goes kind of along with the theme of the particular book that we're reading. And usually it's reading that we wouldn't have done otherwise. And today's reading is Psalm 6. And it says, O Lord, don't rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your rage. Have compassion on me, Lord, for I am weak. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are in agony. I am sick at heart. How long, O Lord, until you restore me? We use terms like a broken heart, a sick heart, and literally, I have heard medical professionals say that people die of a broken heart. Like literally, that is what happens. Their heart was broken. Not, and I don't mean like damaged, it was broken. They died of a broken heart. So what causes someone to have a sick heart? Or it is a broken heart and a sick heart the same thing?
I would have to say I've heard the term broken heart a lot. A sick heart isn't one that like I would go around and say. I don't know. Is that something you would use in everyday?
No, I don't think I would use it every day. I have heard the terminology. I've not heard sick heart as much as I have heart sick. Somebody's heart sick for, you know, and they often mean it very similar to homesick. They miss something,
Okay.
that is present. But
Yeah. Well,
he uses the language here is sick heart, and while you're talking, I'm gonna look at a different translation.
when I was reading this and looking at the question, this is a psalm written by David. And then if we look in Proverbs written by Solomon, so father, son there, I'm sure there is some shared experience, shared terminology, and it says hope deferred makes the heart sick.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be the main thing that makes that in this situation is making the heart sick. It's that hope that God is going to rescue me, but then it doesn't happen in your timetable and it just doesn't keep happening. And then you're just desperate and you don't know what to do.
The ESV and the NASB use the word soul. My soul is troubled, or my soul is greatly troubled. So they don't use the word heart. But I would say now that maybe you want to answer the first question first. But when you hear somebody say mind, body, and soul, or heart and soul, the same thing.
I do want to answer the first question.
Go ahead. So you answer the first question. We'll come back to that.
In regards to what has specifically made David's heart sick here, it sounds to me like, because this is considered one of the penitential psalms, one of the 7, in which like the author realizes a predicament that's usually a result of sin. And he's saying here, like, don't rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your rage. So I think there's a pretty good possibility that the sickness of heart that he's talking about is because of a sin that he's committed. And he's, he knows he has not done what he should have done and that now he's going to be rebuked for it. And he's probably, I get the impression that David had a pretty repentant heart.
Mostly.
Yeah, mostly. And that he probably was sick at himself for what he had done and that it was taking him away from his closeness and relationship with God.
I've told people, I've said this even in a sermon. I think the thing that distinguished David from other sinners, that's the way, if you want to say it that way, was the inclination of his heart.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't take a lot to turn him back
Mm-hmm.
to God. Do you think sick and broken are the same?
I guess they can be. I don't know that they necessarily are the same, though. I can think of like a grandparent of mine who they had been married for over 50 years. And, when she passed away, he did indeed end up getting physically sick with a disease, but he withered away before that ever happened. Mm-hmm. And it was, I think, a result of him being, heartbroken. He didn't know how to live his life anymore
Right.
without her.
I'm 56. I don't know how I would live my life without my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, literally. It
Yeah,
would
and
be,
you guys have not even been married half that time
Yeah,
yet.
no.
I can't imagine either.
I mean, it would just, I don't even want to think about it.
I know.
It seems like broken would be caused by something bad happening, whereas the sickness is like that longing, the desire of something that didn't happen, maybe the need for something to happen. I don't know. That's maybe you asked about mind, body, and soul. I don't know. I feel like those words are used together just to mean a person in some way. I don't.
Like all of you.
Right, all
Well,
of
but
you.
the way I understand the soul, because we say, when you read heart in the Bible, mostly it means the same thing as soul. Mostly. It's like the seat of consciousness, if that's the best way to say it, because we ask Jesus to save our soul, but we also talk about him coming into our heart. We're meaning the same things.
But he also says not to follow like the inclinations of your heart.
Right. Yeah,
That
your
they will
heart's more
deceive
deceitful
you.
above everything else.
Yeah, which I don't really think is your conscience or your soul.
I think it's more emotions. Heart
Yeah.
would be more emotion driven. That's how I would describe it.
More desire driven, probably too.
And some people would say the word spirit. There's your spirit, your soul, your heart. Often those words are used interchangeably in Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how it's being used.
I'm looking at ancient understanding of the heart because that was not necessarily where I expected this conversation to go. But it says the biblical authors talk about the hearts. They had no concept of the brain or any word for it, so they imagined all of the human's intellectual activities to take place in the heart. For example, with your heart. Your heart is where you understand and make connections.
Have you ever been heartsick or brokenhearted? And how would you describe it?
I don't know if I've ever felt like I was heart sick. I'm still not sure I understand exactly what that means, the terminology. It's not something I'm really familiar with or hear used frequently. I do think I've been heartbroken before. And I think it feels kind of like going back to what Alyssa said, it almost feels like hopelessness over whatever the situation is. It feels final and, that the hope for whatever may have been there before no longer exists.
So I have been brokenhearted myself. Those are trying to see how to describe this. I've been brokenhearted, usually at the expense of somebody else.
Mm.
That's how I would describe it. I think I have been heart sick, usually at my own causing.
Mm.
I had created something, a situation, and I wanted it rectified, but I couldn't,
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, and I see them differently, one was my causing, one was somebody else, one was done to me, one I was doing. And I wanted to make it right. And that's how I read this psalmist here. I've done something that has made things wrong. God, when are you going to come and take your foot off my neck?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thing. When is some of the pressure going to be relieved? Because there is nothing worse than there being fractures or brokenness that you want to repair. And there are times, there are moments like you'll have those fractures that need to be repaired that you just can't right at that moment. Either you can't go to make it right, the person's not available.
Mm-hmm.
There are just multiple things that keep that from happening. So and it's very heavy. So I can think of a situation recently where there was a fracture. I personally could have handled it different, but the whole situation was complicated, and I wanted there to be some resolution to it, but it wasn't possible for a few days period of time, and it was very heavy. It was, and I think I would describe that as being sick of heart sick. Like it was troubling. I wanted it right, but I couldn't right at that moment figure out how to make it right. And I mean, there have been other times when people have broken my heart, and I don't like those either. But I think I handle brokenheartedness better than I do heart sickness. In that brokenheartedness, it's okay if you don't want me. I'm going to pick up the pieces and figure it out. Forget you. That's I'm going to figure that out. I can move on. But when it's heart sick, I feel like I'm the one that's done the damage, and I want to make it right. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you've made such a devastating situation that you can't make it right. So I don't think that's true with the Lord. I do think we can put ourselves in predicaments that it's harder to make it right. More difficult to piece it together.
I think we do a good job of convincing ourselves that it's too big of a gap, to get over, that you can't find your way back. I have met people who feel that way, but we know it's not true. Thank goodness.
Yes, that's right. You can always come back. I believe there's always a path back.
Just might be hard to walk.
The path is difficult. Yeah. Because you have to. I mean, there's so many. I mean, that I go back. I just never forget 22 years now, sitting in a Waffle House in Greenville and asking my friend that question, and he said, "Sure, you can do it, but you're going to have to walk so far away from God that the walk back is going to be long and difficult." I didn't know what he was talking about then. Well, I can tell you now, like step for step, how difficult it was. And the reason why people don't come back is not because they can't, and not because God won't accept them. It's just because of the difficulty, even among people. There are people that once you've done something, they've written you off. And I think of a situation. I don't even need to talk about it. I can think of situations where once people had done things, they never could. They were never given an opportunity again because people held it against them, not God. It was people that held it against them. So, well, thank you for joining us this week on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back next week as we continue our conversation here around the books of the Bible.